Following the invasion storyline, a lot of the WWF talent was directionless. In Christian's case, he was European champion, however the moment he lost the gold, he was doing nothing. All that stands out from this time period is his feud with DDP. William Regal wasn't that similar. He was actually fighting for titles and featuring on TV almost every week. Test, though, was the most glaring. The man who was immune from being fired, pushing his weight around, was doing nothing. His star power had dwindled compared to only a year earlier, and he lacked storylines. Christian had a bit of something earlier in the year, but Test, that was a different story. Same with Lance Storm. Somewhere along the way, though, the Canadians crossed paths. Christian and Lance Storm had formed a bond, I'd say. They weren't outright partners, but they were cool with each other. They shared similarities at this point. Being Canadian, former champions, and being wronged by the WWE. On the June 20th, 2002 episode of SmackDown, Christian was set to face Rikishi. He failed to beat Rikishi, and apparently in his eyes, he was screwed over. After the commercial break, Lance Storm proceeded to complain about this, saying it happened to him as well, and the Canadians sensed a pattern. There was prejudice against Canadian wrestlers, not only from the referees, but from the wrestlers in the back, and the company's entire history was about holding back and screwing those from up north. Even the fans. America's prejudice against Canada and the rest of the world. As expected, this got the reaction they wanted, and it was all coming together the way they intended. Lance Storm had plenty of disdain for Americans for their arrogant and conceited mindset, and he shouted that America sucks, and it was the beginning of the un-Americans. Lance Storm's beliefs towards America did not wear down at all, and he was still persistent in fighting back against the country and started off by beating an American, Mark Henry. Christian was a brave ally in the face of hatred, and it was clear that this partnership was going somewhere. However, the two Canadians were very interested in recruiting potential members. Later that night, Test was in his eyes wronged by the referee, and Christian and Storm were there by his side. The three men were in agreement that everybody in America had it out against them, all because of their nationality. The trio was hell-bent on making their feelings known about the United States, regardless of the pushback they'd receive, and they started off by interrupting America the Beautiful on July 4th. And the look on Lillian Garcia's face. Independence Day is clearly the worst day to do something like this, especially in the year of 2002. Christian belittled the fans and said that they think this day was when Will Smith saved the world from a bunch of aliens, and the stamp of approval for the heat these men were receiving was clear. They chanted asshole, asshole at them. Lance Storm gave everyone a history lesson, an example of why the US is terrible for getting involved with other countries, and Test ended things saying the rest of the world hates America, and they've shouted their feelings that America sucks. Rikishi, fighting behalf of America, tried to shut them down, but the numbers got to him and Lance Storm was victorious. Now it was clear that at their core the un-Americans were hypocritical, criticizing America and others for screwing them while passing on the same treatment. The anti-Americans' antics caught the eye of the WWE Tag Team Champions, Edge and Hollywood Hogan. As you guys may know, these two are as patriotic as they come, and this is despite Edge being Canadian. It didn't take long for the un-Americans to receive a title shot at Vengeance. This marked one of the most significant moments for the faction as they captured the tag team titles with the help of Test and eventually Chris Jericho, who blasted Edge with the bell, leading to the title change and the un-Americans being crowned champions. This was all in spite of the biased officiating and hostile fans. Of course, this is from their perspective, and to make matters worse, they relished winning things the un-American way by working hard. That's hard work. The trio opted to take their talents to Raw and debuted with the US flag upside down. Lance Storm said that the flag is a symbol of distress. This version, though, symbolizes the values of American society. He then listed a bunch of heroes and tore them down. JR was most offended by Storm's John Wayne remarks, of course. Christian claimed kids can name every Britney Spears song but struggled to name the Bill of Rights, and even said that the kids prefer to search for corn sites. Out of everyone to interrupt, it was Shawn Michaels. He was talking about Triple H. When they stopped him, they all like, oh, no, what are you doing here? This and that. HBK took a jab at Bret Hart, insulted them, talked about how America's good, and this promo from Michaels offended them to the point where they promised to make an impact that's un-American. Their idea of an impact, though, came at a price. They decided to go after The Undertaker. Taker had some fight in him, but the numbers got to him, and he was no match. They had this mean-ass concerto, and I don't think The Undertaker imagined that he'd get jumped by these three at the same time. Because when you think about it, Christian and Test jumping in The Undertaker does not sound like the most likely scenario. And then you add Lance Storm in there, it's like, what the hell? The Un-Americans were still going hard with their beliefs, talking about how the president couldn't defend this country, sends planes overseas to slaughter innocent civilians, and Storm called The Undertaker a weakened bully who deserves zero respect, and Sergeant Slaughter popped up. It was clear where this was going. Sergeant was literally in their position 11 years ago. If anything, he was more aggressive about it back then. Test ended up dropping him later without even wrestling, and it was just a nothing segment. The Undertaker didn't react well at all to the attack from the last week and quickly retaliated during the Un-Americans' tag team match. They made a run for it, and the American Badass followed with a motorcycle. On the side, Booker T and Goldust became formidable opponents for the champion as Booker beat Lance Storm. Right after the match for America, The Undertaker ran in to equalize the odds. Unfortunately, Mini Dust was unable to aid them. A while later, Eric Bischoff booked an 8-man tag team match. The Un-Americans team up with Triple H against Booker T, Goldust, The Undertaker, and The Rock. Damn, that was stacked. The Un-Americans continued to display acts that they considered American by being rude and offensive, and Test revealed that he had a match with The Undertaker at SummerSlam. So the trio saw this tag team match as a great opportunity to expose these so-called American heroes and make them crumble like the foundation that their country is built upon. Now, this main event was on a random Raw, but don't get it twisted. This was one of the most electrifying main events in Raw history. There was so much heat and excitement radiating from this, and the magic from this main event is something that almost can't be replicated. You guys know those random Raw episodes from like 2000, 2001, 2002, where there's just something special about it. This was one of those matches. Surprisingly, Test scored the victory over The Undertaker to add legitimacy to the Un-Americans, and the following week, the American Badass gave his unfiltered thoughts about the faction. He said that he was proud to be an American. Why? Because he could do whatever he wanted. The Undertaker held resentment for those that take advantage and abuse the American system, such as those who aren't citizens of this country. The Un-Americans. It was no problem for him to pledge allegiance to the flag, and there was also no issue to promise that he'll beat Test and show him what happens when you screw with America. All of a sudden, The Undertaker's music played and Test came out. Yeah, The Undertaker's music played. It was all about provoking the American Badass, and Test only made the issue worse, telling him that America sucks, just like him. A brawl ensues and the rest of the guys come in. Booker T proceeded to challenge them to a tag team match, and the match was made. This match allowed for the Un-Americans to build momentum ahead of SummerSlam as they scored the victory, and their confidence at this point was at an all-time high. The only thing they were annoyed about, though, was having to wrestle in Long Island in front of spoiled and entitled fans. The tag team match between Book Dust and the Un-Americans was solid. It's not going to stand out, but it padded an already great show. Booker T and Goldust were still in their early days as a tag team, but were slowly growing on the fans to the point where they were some of the most entertaining wrestlers on Raw. The Un-Americans' ethics were once again exposed here, and their fraudulent acts were certainly growing thin as Booker and Goldust caught up to them, but then Test ran in and dropped Booker, leading to them scoring the victory. Decent match, but it would have stood out more had the babyfaces won here. As for Test, his match with The Undertaker was a nice spot on the card, but ultimately though, it ended the way everyone expected, and The Undertaker won it for America. I mean, was it going to end any other way? The Un-Americans were starting to fall off at this point. Christian lost to Booker T the next night, and Test, seeing that they lost their ways a bit, promised to do something that will have people talking about the Un-Americans for years. Test had a blowtorch on his hand later that night, and JR was fuming. This is JR Premium, the JR that curses out Triple H at 10:58 p.m., that type of JR. Just as they're ready to burn the flag, Kane teases a return, and it's back to work. Booker T and Goldust try to put a stop to this, but the numbers got to them, and then Test grabs the flag. He pulls out the blowtorch. The King's ready to do something, but Kane returns. MSG was all in, and the unlikely American hero comes in to shut down the evil foreigners and does it in style. Great moment. This is such a great moment to see Kane return like this. Everyone was hyped to see him. The heels were getting booed. They were getting hated on, and he comes in and makes a save. It was cool. At the same time, Kane got his match against the champions, and it was a handicap match. The two men were throwing just about everything at Kane, but to no avail, and the Big Red Machine was victorious. Right afterwards, Test tried to burn the flag again when Bradshaw ran in. The two faces cleared the ring and waved the flag along, and it was clear that Kane and Bradshaw were edging close to taking out the champions. So they received the chance the following week on Raw for the tag team titles. The crowd was heated for this one as expected, but this time around, instead of being saved by Test, William Regal came in and dropped Bradshaw with the brass knucks, costing them the gold and officially joining the Un-Americans. To him, though, it wasn't joining anything. He's always been an Un-American. Holding disdain for this very country came natural to him. Regal, a part of the Un-Americans, was due to the fact that the other men, according to Bruce Pritchard, were worried over the heat they would receive. Regal was a bit old school in that regard and took it as a positive. This came only 2 weeks after the trio expressed worry over potentially burning the US flag and MSG. They weren't supposed to do it, of course, but it was a scary thought to them, and some backstage felt that they weren't appreciative of such an opportunity, because heat like this is something special. With that said, the Un-Americans were going up against a united front. Bradshaw, Goldust, Booker, and Kane, who were not going to rest until they eradicated the group. Their next title match was marred in controversy, which has basically become normal. So the four men, this time it was Bubba Ray Dudley instead of Bradshaw, challenged the Un-Americans to a tag team match at Unforgiven. Unforgiven marked the beginning of the end of the Un-Americans. They were beaten convincingly and only got worse from there as the Un-Americans lost the tag team championships. Christian complained about this, and Regal told him that they shouldn't whine like Americans. They should regroup, and this was not followed up on though. And tensions was growing from within the group. Then to top it all off, Lance Storm lost to some jobber named Randy Orton. Christian insulted him and said that he'll do what Lance Storm couldn't and beat Randy Orton. He failed, and at this point the group was basically done. William Regal tried to put a stop and told the two men to see tag team harmony firsthand. What actually happened, though, was an entirely different story, and the Un-Americans brawled with each other, and so that was the end of the group. Regal and Storm became a tag team that found some success but had their run come to a screeching halt after Regal became sick and went out for a year. Christian formed a tag team with Chris Jericho, and Test had Stacy Keibler as his manager. The Un-Americans had a very short run. It wasn't bound to last too long, especially because of the whole anti-American thing. It was worn out. Not to mention somewhat risky in the year of 2002. It wasn't like Muhammad Hassan later on. 9/11 was fresh at this point, and patriotism was at an all-time high. So for these guys to go out there and trash the country, even try to burn the flag, it was scary to them. There's a reason why William Regal was added to the group. It's because he enjoyed heat. The others, though, according to Bruce Pritchard, were scared. And I quote, Regal was the only one in the Un-Americans who was not afraid of heat. You had a group of William Regal, Lance Storm, Christian, and Test. They were going to denounce America and call themselves the Un-Americans. Talk about how it was great to not be American, to be from Canada or England, but no one with the exception of Regal was willing to embrace the gimmick. I'd say the rest of those guys were afraid of the heat, and Regal really wanted to do it, but it was extremely short-lived because after watering it down, nobody gave a... Nobody wanted to do it. They were uncomfortable with the heat. All the guys lived in Florida, I believe, at the time, with the exception of Regal, and they were like, man, we've got to cross the border. We've got to live here. We've got families. We don't want to be un-American. We love America. It's a work. It's a gimmick. But they were uncomfortable with it, so we ended it. William Regal added that Storm was in. He didn't worry about much, but wasn't sure whether or not Christian and Test were interested. Christian himself claimed that he wasn't into the gimmick. He couldn't make it work. Another rumor from this time period was that Christian and Test refused to cut their hair. Storm's hair was short, and they wanted the trio to share the same look, and they already had issues within the group. Now they turned down the haircut, and there was nowhere to go. Plus, the things they were doing was regular heel stuff at this point, so their peak already passed. The team was originally supposed to be a Canadian Four Horsemen with Chris Jericho in the group, but they didn't follow up on the plans, and instead it turned into this anti-American thing, which, when you look at what was going on, was not going to work, because Christian, these guys, they were a bit worried about the heat they were receiving. Not to mention, it was a bit bizarre, especially with WWE being like, oh, we could do this right now. Like, 9/11 had just occurred, and WWE didn't really care. They were like, oh, we could get cheap heat from this and whatnot. And as I said, it worked for a bit, but after SummerSlam, they lost, and there was nowhere for the group to go. There wasn't much for them to do after SummerSlam, as they already peaked. So yeah. Alright, what do you guys think of the Un-Americans? Please comment down below, and that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the pump handle, slam on the like button, and perhaps the Unprettier on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.